How's it going, everybody? Welcome to week 3. Just moving right along. After this week, we're halfway through the summer course, kind of just flying. So this is sort of the midterm, if you will, of what we're doing. And this week, the first 2 weeks we sort of getting the lay of the land, getting civilizations, and now we're sort of taking another step in sort of historical progression, I guess, if you could, chronology and the idea of empires. That civilizations were sort of the first phase where people were building cities. I mean, there are definitely some consolidations, Egypt and Mesopotamia, but really after around 500 BC, if you will, this new form, this sort of more centralized forms of government, economies, societies, cultures start to emerge with these ideas of empires, which you can kind of see. I sort of broke them down there. South Asia with the Maurya, that's like 260, 300 BCE. One before that is the Persians, which are sometimes seen as the first empire because it's sort of the Persian Empire is discussed in the lecture, right? It was like 27 satrapies, so satraps, sort of centralized, so imperial officials in each sort of province, if you will, was centralized governing systems there within the Persian Empire. And then other empires move up. The Han Dynasty, the Roman Empire, which people are familiar with, but sort of kind of give a history of that, of the Mediterranean in general, with the Greek unification, particularly after the Persian Wars. That's one of the discussion posts there, what was this pivotal moment of the Persian Wars from both the Persian side and the Greek side. I mean, there's two sides of that, but particularly the Greek side is the unification, sort of the height of Greek thought. When you think about Aristotle and Plato and Socrates, that's all that sort of interim period between the Persian and Peloponnesian Wars. A lot of plays, this period of peace and prosperity. The idea of golden ages kind of come up in this, if Han China or the Roman Empire and in the Mediterranean, these heights of expansion and consolidation. A lot that goes hand in hand with this formations of what will become world religions. We talked about Hinduism, Buddhism, and Jainism in India. But we'll talk about the spread of Buddhism a little bit later. Christianity emerges in the Mediterranean world. So kind of the foundations of these new systems. And then the other part of this is this idea of epics and stories, literature, really started to take hold and transmit culture and morals and ethics and archetypes and figures. And we see that kind of coincide with this idea of empires, of religion. These epics embed all of those. They give how to rule, the roles of these gods within society. If you look at the Mahabharata and the Ramayana, which we talked about in the context of South Asia, that the big one here is this god of Vishnu who comes down, these avatars of Krishna or Rama, right, to help save the world. And these stories that are very familiar. I gave the video links there. I mean, these stories are still well known today in India. And I mean, you can see that. I mean, there's a new movie, The Odyssey, is coming out. The Homeric epics of the Iliad and the Odyssey are still very relevant today. And that's why I kind of gave that Hawaiian sub-module too, because there's Hawaiian epics are still very relevant. Pele's stories, how she came and dug different holes until she finally found her home at Hale Ma'u up there in Kilauea. Hiaki Kapoleo Pele story talks about Hiaka, her sister, Pele's sister, who goes around to go all the way to Kauai to find Loiao and bring him back. First resuscitate him from the dead and then bring him back to Pele, and all of this sort of stories and ideas and connections that are made through that story as well. So these are all really tied in. There's a lot of information this week, which is why for quiz 2, there's no writing this week. It's just get through the materials, get familiar with these terms, and quiz 2 is mainly just sort of maps, fill in the blank, matching, be familiar with some of these things. There are a lot of probably new terms, new ideas that you maybe are unfamiliar with, or maybe a little bit familiar with. Maybe you know a little bit of the Roman Empire or the Greeks. Maybe you've heard a little bit about China or Japan. We talk about Japan and the transition, the beginning of the Japanese Empire, the imperial family, Amaterasu, and the connection with Shintoism there as well. So maybe you're a little familiar with that if you've gone to a Shinto shrine. There's one here in Hilo, or been to Japan and been to Shinto shrines there. I gave some or performed Shinto ceremonies, Setsuban festival, those kind of things. So there's a lot that we've talked about. We covered a lot this week. A lot of empires, a lot of epics, a lot of names and dates and figures. So just kind of get through that material. Then by Friday, the quiz is able to take from Friday to Saturday. So if you need a little extra time to get through that, feel free. No writing this time. I will look over your review or discussion posts on Friday. So get them in today. By today, again, there's 3 questions. One about religion. Again, you can just use the course materials as with everything. Make sure you're referring to the course materials. The Persian Wars, how is that sort of definitive? And then also the last one, if you want to do an epic, if there's one, you can choose one that we've talked about in class, or if there's one you're more familiar with, feel free. But again, the idea is, how does it relate to course materials? Make sure it's not just like a summary of online that you cut and paste in there. How is this relating to things we're learning about? I want to engaged, applied education, applied knowledge, applying what we're learning in this class to your responses. So make sure you're still doing that. Great. Have a good rest of your week.